Anyone familiar with Halo's Master Chief will know that the towering 7-foot Spartan is a man of few words. So in the spirit of John 1:17, we're going to cut right to the chase. Halo Infinite's campaign is the most outstanding entry in the series to date. That might sound exaggerated to those who still regard Bungie's titles as the cream de la cream of Halo campaigns. But after rolling the credits on Halo Infinite's lengthy single-player mode, we can say with confidence that our skepticism was thankfully unwarranted. The stench of Halo 5 Guardians on the Inspire campaign, which has loomed over the developer 343 Industries like a dark cloud since 2015, has finally been put to rest. The highly complex story, protracted gunfights, and characters are thankfully gone. Instead, we have a game that not only captures the very essence of Halo Combat Evolved, but one that manages to deliver something that the original Xbox title never realistically could: genuine player freedom. One of Halo 5's prominent criticisms was that it required players to have an expansive knowledge of Halo's intricate universe. It often felt like players had to have read every single novel to have even the vaguest understanding of what was happening outside of the game's main plot, which was incredibly disjointed and underwhelming. But for Halo Infinite, 343 Industries has gone back to basics and concentrated the story around three core elements: Master Chief, his relationship with a personal AI, and the battle against a dangerous new threat. As you'd expect, additional backstory and lore are present throughout the game's plot. They only serve to supplement the overall story, not distract from it. It means Halo Infinite's story is intimately familiar, accessible to newcomers, yet fresh and exciting. The game begins rather unexpectedly. Atriox, an imposing brute and the leader of a fearless army known as the Banished, brutally beats Master Chief and leaves him stranded and helpless as Atriox's forces decimate Earth UNSC's forces. After 6 months missing in action, a UNSC soldier known as the Pilot manages to recover and revive our fallen hero. Without a moment to spare, Chief sets out to fight for human survival and discover what happened to his former ally, Cortana. To do so, he'll need the help of the Pilot and a brand new AI companion called the Weapon. Halo veterans will instantly gravitate towards the Weapon. From her funny interjections to her pensive observations, the way the relationship develops throughout the campaign is one of the story's greatest strengths, and crucial to establish an emotional connection between Master Chief and the player. While similarities are apparent, the Weapon isn't a carbon copy of Cortana. She's far more easygoing than her holographic counterpart. She also has a habit of bringing out a more playful side of Master Chief that feels long overdue. The Weapon is noticeably more naive than Cortana ever was as well. She's slowly trying to make sense of everything that's happened since the Banished defeated the UNSC. Again, the game doesn't assume the player knows every facet of Halo's universe or what happened to previous titles. So a Halo Infinite story is without a doubt compelling, but the series' lore isn't exactly the main reason why so many players fell in love with the original game 20 years ago. It's the split-second gameplay that cemented Xbox premier first-person shooter into the archives of video game history, and it's the best it's ever been in Halo Infinite. Halo Infinite's campaign begins in a typically linear fashion as you mow down waves of animated grunts, birdy brutes, and deadly elites on board a now ravaged spacecraft. However, several new gameplay mechanics dramatically affect how Halo fundamentally plays. The first change seems insignificant, but it doesn't ever get old. You can now pick up various explosive canisters and lob them at enemies. We have been blowing up red barrels in games for years, but being able to grab and throw these hazards into the face of a brute or towards a gaggle of grunts is satisfying and liberating. And there's a handy way to seize these volatile canisters from a distance too. The grabber shot, which has already captured the imagination of Halo Infinite players online, is quite simply an eye-opener. You can pull weapons and canisters towards you, scale previously impossible heights and buildings with ease, swing yourself around corners to escape imminent danger, and propel yourself towards enemies for a satisfying beatdown. The grabber shot has more player freedom and traversal options that it's hard to imagine how Master Chief has ever coped without it. Not once does it feel forced or unnecessary. Instead, it evokes a sense of giddy satisfaction when you use it to open up a new level to Halo's combat that hasn't been possible before. And with Zeta Halo, players are given the perfect landscape. Halo Infinite Zeta Halo will likely evoke a breathtaking reaction in many players. When you first step out into the game's open-ended area and see countless enemies dotted around the environment and into the distance, Halo Infinite presents its first opportunity to flex its sandbag muscles. You'll have various weapons and sparking abilities at your disposal to help you eliminate enemies, but how you approach that is entirely up to you. Perhaps you want to pick off enemies using a long-range weapon from a distance, or use a grapple shot to reach a higher vantage point. These constant moments of freedom offered to the player are exceptionally gratifying, facilitated by Zeta Halo's massive scale and the new tools of destruction that the grapple shot available to the player. This blank canvas that Halo Infinite gives the player to tackle skirmishes how they see fit leads to in-game moments that you can't help but share with others. But how does Halo's open world work in a series that has always driven the player forward in one clear direction? Well, there are still story-focused missions to complete, but this time you'll have several optional side activities that you can take on if you wish. The most important of these side activities revolve around capturing forward operating bases, FOBs. Play a bunch of enemies from a FOB, and not only will you reveal more areas of interest on the map, but you'll also be able to use your new outposts to call in vehicles, weapons, and marines to help aid in the battle. However, you need to earn valor to call in the best equipment. You can earn valor by completing various missions such as taking down high value targets, overthrowing strongholds, rescuing captured marines, and destroying propaganda towers. You can also find armor lockers that contain cosmetic items for Halo Infinite's multiplayer, data pads that expand upon the game's lore, and sparking cores to upgrade your abilities like the grabber shot. The more value you earn, the more firepower you can bring to the banished forces. And when you've got a razorback full of marines and a Sputnik rocket launcher on your back, the odds can shift in your favor massively. The above gameplay loop might sound all too familiar for an open world game, but Halo Infinite's focus on player freedom and its sandbox style gameplay is a perfect match. Predictably, the game clearly reverts the type for the story-focused missions, which sees you moving through awe-inspiring internal structures and completing objectives as you go. You're still getting your classic Halo experience then, but the open world elements help things feel unmistakably new at the same time. The top-class sound design elevates Halo's rewarding gameplay and captivating story to new heights, as the game truly gets the most out of Dolby Atmos and spatial audio. From pinpointing enemies with astonishing accuracy to hearing bullets whiz by Master Chief's head and impacting your immediate surroundings, the audio team has done a remarkable job at making Halo's alien universe feel real. It's as though you're embodying Master Chief himself as you walk around the ring's hostile surface. Halo Infinite sounds superb then, but what about those underwhelming visuals that we saw during the campaign's first reveal in August 2019? Halo Infinite isn't the visual excellence that some players may be expecting, but the new Slipspace engine that 343 Industries developed in-house is certainly no walkover. Halo Infinite is a gorgeous looking game that also delivers rock solid performance. Yes, some parts of the open world can look a little rough around the edges, and the infamous bridges can still look rather crude when zoomed in up close, but they honestly pale into insignificance. The realistic lighting, textures, expert HDR implementation, and dazzling particle effects are all extremely pleasing to the eye, along with the game's fluid animations. From a technical perspective, it's worth noting that a few visual oddities can distract from the game's presentation. Reload animations seem to occur at a lower frame rate, and cutscenes can be somewhat choppy. Environmental popping can also happen, but it's minimal and won't be noticeable to most players. Pleasingly, load times are particularly non-existent on Xbox Series X, which helps with the game's overall pacing. Verdict. In 2021, so many games try to make the player feel like they can do almost anything, but Halo Infinite lets your imagination run wild while it actively encourages you to try outrageous things at every opportunity. There's something irrefutably special about Halo Infinite, and if you've dabbled with the game's free-to-play multiplayer, you'll already have an understanding as to why. Now, finish the fight. 9 out of 10.